Your Honda Odyssey just started shuddering between second and third gear. Maybe it's a Chevy Malibu. Maybe it's a Toyota Camry with 90,000 miles on it. Doesn't matter. You bring it to the dealership, and within 10 minutes, a service advisor is standing in front of you with a quote for $4,000. Torque converter replacement. Maybe a full transmission rebuild. He tells you it happens. He tells you these things wear out. What he doesn't tell you is that Honda already published the fix for this exact problem, gave it a bulletin number, and made it available to every dealership in the country. And there's a real chance the part they're about to replace isn't broken at all. This video is about dealerships and specifically about the gap between what a manufacturer already knows and what a service advisor tells you across the counter. You know the feeling I'm describing. That hesitation pulling away from a stop sign. That little shudder around 40 miles an hour, right when the torque converter locks up. It feels like the beginning of the end. It feels expensive. And for a lot of drivers, it is expensive because the shop goes straight to the big-ticket repair instead of checking the cheap one first. Here's what not knowing this costs you. A full transmission rebuild in the US typically runs somewhere between $2,500 and $4,000, depending on the vehicle. A torque converter replacement on its own can still run over $1,000 in parts and labor. Compare that to a proper transmission fluid and filter service, which usually costs under $200, and a bottle of transmission additive, which costs about $15. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between a repair bill and a car payment. And here's the question that should really bother you. If the cheap fix is real, documented, and sitting in a government database with the manufacturer's own name on it, why isn't it the first thing anyone mentions? Before this video is over, I'm going to show you the actual manufacturer bulletins that describe this failure, tell you exactly what to search for and ask for by name, walk you through the real legal reason this information never reaches you automatically, and explain why the cheap fix rarely gets offered first. Let's start with what that shudder actually is, because most drivers assume it means metal grinding on metal, gears wearing down, or something mechanical and catastrophic. Sometimes that's true. But here's the part that surprises most people the first time they hear it. A huge number of transmission slipping complaints in modern automatic transmissions aren't a mechanical failure at all. They're a fluid failure. And those two things get treated completely differently. One costs $15, the other costs $4,000. The tricky part is that from the driver's seat, they feel identical. Both show hesitation. Both show up as a shudder at right around town speed. Both make you grip the wheel a little tighter and start doing math about your savings account. So how is anyone supposed to tell the difference before they've already paid for a diagnosis? That's actually the question this whole video answers, and the answer starts somewhere you wouldn't expect, inside the one component of your transmission that isn't a gear at all. Every automatic transmission built in the last several decades uses something called a torque converter. This fluid coupling connects your engine to your transmission before the gears ever get involved. For most of driving history, that connection stayed fluid the whole time, which is smooth but wastes energy as heat. So engineers added a clutch inside the converter that locks up at a certain speed, so the engine and transmission spin together directly instead of through fluid, saving fuel and improving how the car feels on the highway. Here's where it gets interesting. That lockup moment depends on your transmission fluid holding a very specific, very narrow coefficient of friction. Not too slippery, not too grabby, right in a designed range. When that fluid breaks down from heat, and heat cycling is the completely normal, expected condition inside a transmission, especially in stop-and-go traffic, towing, or hot climates, the friction properties drift outside that range. The lockup clutch starts to grab and release instead of locking cleanly. That grab and release, dozens of times a second, is what you feel as judder. It is, in a very real sense, your transmission fluid failing a chemistry test it was designed to pass, not your transmission falling apart. Here's the part that makes this even more likely to happen on a newer car, not less. Modern transmissions run thinner, lower viscosity fluid than older ones did, largely because thinner fluid reduces internal drag and helps automakers hit fuel economy targets. That's a real, deliberate engineering trade-off. The downside is that thinner fluid has a narrower thermal margin. It degrades and drifts out of its ideal friction range faster than the thicker, more heat-tolerant fluids used in transmissions from 20 or 30 years ago. In other words, The same fuel economy push that makes your car cheaper to fill up also makes it more likely to develop exactly the symptom we're talking about, sooner in its life than you'd expect. And this is the detail that should stop you in your tracks. None of this is a fringe theory from a forum somewhere. It's not a secret. It's written down by the people who built the transmission in a document with an actual reference number. If you're finding this useful, hit subscribe, because I go through exactly this kind of gap between what the manufacturer already knows and what actually gets offered to you at the counter every week. Picture the scene. You pull into the service bay. The advisor walks around your car, doesn't drive it, doesn't pull a single code, and says the word shudder like he's heard it 1,000 times before, because he has. He quotes you a torque converter replacement, maybe a full rebuild, and moves on to the next customer. What he doesn't say out loud is that his own manufacturer has, in more than one case, already told him in writing that this exact symptom is frequently a fluid problem, not a hardware problem. Honda has published multiple technical service bulletins describing torque converter judder in the Odyssey minivan, tracing it to transmission fluid deteriorating faster than expected under specific heat conditions. Their documented remedy in many of these cases isn't a new torque converter at all. It's a fluid service, sometimes paired with a software update that manages transmission temperature more conservatively. Now here's where it gets stranger, because Honda isn't the only one. GM's own technicians have long documented shudder complaints on the 6-speed automatic transaxles used across a wide range of Chevrolet, Buick, and GMC models. And GM's answer wasn't a redesigned transmission. It was a specific, factory-approved fluid conditioner sold right through the dealer parts counter, meant to be added during a fluid service to correct exactly this friction-related shudder. Two of the biggest automakers in the country, on two completely different vehicle platforms, independently arrived at the same conclusion. Check the fluid chemistry before you touch the hardware. That is not a coincidence. That is an industry quietly agreeing on a diagnosis it doesn't advertise. So why doesn't it get offered first? Because a technical service bulletin is not a recall. Nobody is required to call you and tell you it exists. It sits in the service department's internal system, and whether it gets pulled up depends entirely on whether the person writing your repair order bothers to check for it before quoting you the bigger job. A fluid service and an additive is maybe a $200 ticket. A torque converter or a rebuild is a 4-figure ticket. You do not need a conspiracy to explain why one of those gets checked first and one doesn't. You just need an incentive. And there's a second incentive most drivers never think about, because it doesn't involve the dealership at all. It involves the technician standing under the hood. Most dealership techs aren't paid by the hour. They're paid flat rate, meaning they get credited a fixed number of book hours for a given job regardless of how long it actually takes. A torque converter replacement pays a lot of book hours. Pulling up a bulletin, cross-checking your symptom against it, and trying a fluid service first pay very little. That's not a technician doing anything dishonest. That's just what happens when an entire pay structure quietly rewards the bigger job over the smarter one. Nobody had to bury this information. The incentives just never pointed toward finding it. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. If your car has a safety defect, the manufacturer is required by federal law to find you and tell you. That's what a recall is. NHTSA regulates it. Dealerships are obligated to fix it, usually for free, and you'll get a letter in the mail whether you ask for one or not. So why doesn't the same rule apply to a torque converter judder that's been documented, written up, and distributed to every dealership in the country? The answer is almost disappointingly simple once you hear it. A technical service bulletin isn't classified as a safety defect. It's a repair guidance document, the manufacturer telling its own technicians, here's a symptom we've seen, and here's how to diagnose and fix it correctly, without the legal weight or notification requirements attached to a recall. That distinction isn't a cover-up. It's a real regulatory category, and it exists for a reasonable purpose. Not every documented repair pattern rises to the level of a safety recall. But that same reasonable distinction is also exactly why a fix like this one can sit in a public database for years, fully documented, without a single owner ever being notified it exists. Think about what that means practically. The information isn't classified. It isn't proprietary. It isn't locked behind a paywall or a dealer-only login. It is, by design, sitting in the same public system as recall notices, just one folder over. In the folder, nobody's required to open your mail about. The only thing standing between you and that bulletin is knowing to go looking for it. That's the entire trick. Not concealment, just silence where a phone call could have been. So here's what you actually do, in order, before you agree to any transmission replacement or rebuild quote. Step 1. Search for a technical service bulletin on your exact vehicle. Search for transmission judder fix or transmission shudder TSB along with your make, model, and year. Do this before you ever set foot in a shop. Manufacturers have issued real documented bulletins for shudder and judder complaints on a wide range of vehicles, not just Honda. If a bulletin exists for your transmission-specific symptom, you now have something in writing to bring to whoever services your car. And if you're still near the mileage or time covered by an extended warranty, this can mean the fix is free. Step 2. Get an actual fluid and filter service, not a top-off. This is the detail almost every shop skips when they're moving fast. A transmission flush pushes new fluid through the system but doesn't always fully exchange what's sitting in the pan. And it doesn't replace a dirty filter if your transmission has a serviceable one. Ask specifically for a drain and fill with filter replacement or a full fluid exchange using the manufacturer-specified fluid type. And this detail actually matters more than most people realize. Honda transmissions generally call for Honda ATFZ1. Toyota's 6-speed automatics generally call for Toyota WS fluid. GM's transaxles generally call for Dexron 6 or GM's newer HP specification. These aren't interchangeable marketing labels. They're different friction chemistries built for different clutch materials, and using the wrong one is a documented cause of shudder all by itself. Look up your specific manufacturer's fluid spec before your service, not after. Step 3. Consider a reputable friction modifier additive as a supplement, not a substitute. This is a real, established category of product. You'll find it under names like transmission fix, transmission shudder guard, or friction modifier additive at any auto parts store in the country. These products are designed to restore stable friction properties to aging fluid and are specifically marketed for the exact symptom we're describing: shudder, hesitation, and slipping in an otherwise mechanically sound transmission. They are not a miracle cure for a transmission with physically worn-out friction material. If the clutch packs are worn down to bare metal, no additive fixes that. And if your fluid smells burnt or looks dark brown instead of red, that's a sign of deeper wear, not just heat-cycled fluid. But for the early-stage shudder we're talking about, this $15 bottle is genuinely the documented, mainstream, first-line treatment. Not some barn secret, just something most people never hear about before they're already signing a rebuild estimate. Step 4. Drive it and reassess before authorizing anything bigger. A fluid and filter service plus an additive treatment needs a real driving cycle, generally 100 miles or more, before you can fairly judge whether it resolved the shudder. If it doesn't, you now know you're dealing with something mechanical, and you can move to a bigger repair with actual confidence instead of guessing. Say it with me, because this is the exact phrase you want typed into a search bar tonight: transmission judder fix, and your vehicle's year, make, and model. That single search puts you in a different negotiating position than the person who just says yes to the first number on the screen. I'm not asking you to take my word for any of this, and honestly, you shouldn't. So here's exactly where to check it yourself. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, maintains a public, searchable database of technical service bulletins by vehicle make, model, and year. It's free, it's federal, and it's the same information a dealership technician pulls up on their own screen before they ever talk to you. You can search it yourself in under a minute. Look for Honda's bulletins on Odyssey Torque Converter Judder as one documented, citable example of a manufacturer acknowledging this exact fluid-related failure mode and prescribing a fluid service as part of the remedy. Then search your own vehicle. You might be surprised at what's already sitting there in writing, waiting for someone to ask about it. And here's the part that genuinely still gets me every time I dig into one of these. This isn't a workaround. It's not a loophole. It's not information anyone had to leak or dig up through a records request. It's the manufacturer's own documented position on their own transmission, sitting in a government-run public database, free for anyone to read, that most drivers never think to check, not because it's hidden, but because nobody standing across the service counter has a single reason to point you toward it. The information isn't buried. It's just never volunteered. And once you notice that difference, you start noticing it everywhere else in car ownership too. So here's where this leaves you. The next time a shudder shows up in your shifting, you don't have to walk in blind and take the first number you're given. You check for a bulletin on your exact vehicle. You ask for a real fluid and filter service, not a 5-minute flush. You try a $15 friction modifier before you agree to a $4,000 rebuild. And if none of that fixes it, at least now you're paying for a real mechanical repair instead of guessing your way into one. I want to know what state you're driving in and what shudder you're dealing with right now. Drop your make, model, and mileage in the comments, and tell me whether you'd ever heard of a technical service bulletin before this video. I read every one of these, and I want to see how many of us are out here paying for repairs that a bulletin already had an answer for. And here's one more thing to sit with before you go check your own vehicle's history. If a fix to this well-documented, cheap, and easy-to-verify thing can sit quietly in a public database for years without a single owner being told, it's worth wondering what else is filed the same way, on the same system, for the same reason. If you like this one, the next video breaks down the check engine light reset that most people pay a shop $60 just to clear, and why that light comes back on for a reason most drivers are never told. Subscribe so you don't miss it.